Cindy, may we have a roll call, please?
James.
Here.
Helen.
Here.
Dale.
Yeah.
Ron.
I'm here. Thank you, Cindy. Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Certification of compliance with open meetings law. Been
Yes.
satisfied. Thank you. The meeting agenda has been presented. Public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to address the board? And if so, you may do it now. Yes, ma'am.
Linda Zillmer, Edgewater property owner. First of all, I just want to express my deep appreciation for the efforts the county has made to make these committee meetings and county board meetings available online for people to both observe and to provide public comment. Mr. Colson, I guess I'll single him out, but I know there's more people involved, really go above and beyond to help us all adapt to technology. And most recently, he's been working on a glitch that is happening with the county's web hosting company as far as being able to search past meeting minutes and agendas. And the reason that came up is I was trying to do a search of the name John Huckhammer because he has provided to the county board a number of PowerPoint presentations on how to conduct effective meetings. And unfortunately, when he's come here to either present them at a committee level or a county board level, he really wasn't given adequate time. And so I'm not sure that supervisors have gone home and taken advantage of looking at those materials. And this year, the county, Wisconsin Counties Association training materials is available online for both county board supervisors and the public. So the public can see what you're seeing. And the reason I'm leading into this too is to specifically mention that I have emailed you, Chairman Schuman, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, Supervisor Schlender, with Mr. Hoff on copy regarding actions that the county board took at their last meeting. I extensively backed up my concerns with documentation, and I understand that I am not going to get a response. And I don't think that that's appropriate. Also, with regard to today's agenda, well, there is notice on item number 10 that you're going to do something with regard to policy for public comment. Public can't see what that is. So I guess rather than come to you with a resolution to support the First Amendment, I would say that, yes, there needs to be public comment guidelines. And specifically, I would hope that public comment, there can be not a full discussion, but there can be answering of questions. And neither public comment nor other matters for discussion only should be used to develop things like a resolution for Second Amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Okay, moving on to number 5, minutes from our previous meeting, admin, July 9, 2020. Mr. Kinsley? Ms. Dennis?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Ms. Dennis to approve the meeting minutes as presented. Is there any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Veterans Service Department report. Gary, good morning.
The report I sent you, I did see I had a typo under contacts. It was, I have the month of June, it really should be July. And for the month of July, we had 403 phone calls, 194 letters, 84 office visits. The service office up to the 1st of August, or the 31st of July, submitted 45 disability and pension claims to date, and for retroactive payments of $317,668.53 of claims decided in the veterans' favor. Making lemonade out of lemons. July 20th, the National Association of County Veteran Service officers actually did their first virtual training, national accreditation training, and this is the the big boys and girls accreditation. And we couldn't get Michelle in to the state training, but the Nationals offered up virtual training, and she said, yes, I want to do it, Gary. So she did it, and she did do it. She is nationally accredited. She is the first Veterans Benefits Specialist in Sawyer County to be nationally accredited. So she is doing well. Like I said, making lemonade out of lemons. For the state continuation training, this is what I need, and this is what Michelle will need next year as well, at least as a minimum. They've scheduled and canceled. Right now, I am scheduled to go to Siren on the 5th through the 9th to get my annual accreditation training. I do not know what's going to happen if we don't get it. I think there's going to be lots of waivers within the country for this training, or they're going to have to come up with something much like the Nationals to get that training done. So again, our budget was submitted to Mike Key. No increases and stuff that I can control. Everything else is insurance and what have you that increase. Otherwise, zero increase, and that has remained the same budget for I think the last 3 years. So anyway, so we're doing well. At least we're trying to do well. The only thing, a side note, I got an email from Congressman Tiffany's office this week that they are planning a Veterans Expo at the Veterans Center on the 26th of August from 10 to 2. I don't know how that's going to work out, to be honest with you, and it's hard enough to get people to come in to, to do business now, especially with this uptick in cases that are being, testing positive. So I'm not sure I will go down there as, if it's going to go, I will go down there and mask up, but I'm not too confident in the turnout. I don't think they thought it through very well. So, yes, sir.
What is this? You say?
The congressman is basically hosting an expo for veterans down
Is this a
at the.
campaign stop?
No, it's not a campaign stop. They're trying to get business from the CBSOs from around the local area, northern Wisconsin, and anybody that supports veterans or has business with veterans to get them to come in and provide their a display and talk to veterans. What benefits are available to them. So, and that's it. But like I said,
That's kind of what you do.
dumbfounded with everybody, going in the fetal position and covering up that to do that. But and I'm not trying to be biased and political, in any way. It just doesn't seem.
This is what you do every day, and now they're coming in here.
Well, it's outreach. It would be outreach for me, and that's fine. I'll go. Like I said, I don't have a problem going down there. I just don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be the turnout it would have been if we didn't have COVID. Let's put it that way. So, yeah. Other than that, we're doing good. Any questions?
Yeah, great, thanks, Gary. Any questions for Gary? Hi, Gary, how is your transportation going now with this uptick in COVID?
That's good.
I know we had the public health officer speak.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Almost once a week, I run down to Minneapolis for somebody. They're starting, like I said, I think 2 months ago, they were trying to open up 25% of their appointments, what would be normal down in Minneapolis. And so they started that, but now with this uptick, I don't know, and some offices within the Minneapolis VA, like audiology, they're pretty strict. And optometry is something else. The optometry has actually been seeing people more, So I think it's up to the primary provider within the office of how much they're gonna open up and how much they're not. So it's been give or take, but averaging right now has been about 1 trip a week. So.
Good, thanks, Gary. Anything else for Gary?
I'm sure that Gary does a lot more than what he says in here. I know he does. The outreach that you give to all these vets, I certainly appreciate, and I appreciate everything you do, Gary.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you.
Sure do. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to number 7, information technology report. Mr. Colson.
Good morning. Just a few things we've been working on. The Human Services Department will be doing a lot more virtual meetings for their clients. So we've been getting their staff both in the office as well as remotely set up for video on Zoom. And so we're kind of slowly rolling that out. There's there's a grant that's going to be deployed. We haven't heard the details yet. We submitted an application for that grant for security, network security for elections primarily, but it can help the whole countywide security posture too. So once that, we'll be notified if we've been approved or not, probably within the next month or so. Just very recently, we've been asked to help the public health officer deploy more user-friendly COVID-19 information on the website. So we're actually working with our GIS folks since she likes the way that there's a web portal that is kind of geared towards mapping, and she sort of likes that. And so we thought, well, fine, we'll just move our COVID-19 information over there. So our GIS people are assisting in that effort. So that kind of started today. Projects completed. We installed something called a mobility router. Basically what that does is allows staff to make phone calls from their cell phones and make it appear that they're coming from work. And so that's another aspect of remote work that we're helping staff to do, so people don't have their home phone numbers. We discovered some bad wiring at the airport for their internet, and we fixed that and put some new equipment in, so now Derek's internet and phone service have improved. Other than that, maintenance, help desk, ongoing every day, and that's about it. If there's any questions.
Dale.
Oh, go ahead, Bruce, Rich.
Mine is with the increase with the online meetings and the remote working sites. How's your bandwidth?
For the courthouse, we have very good. We're 1 gig, and so we haven't really noticed any problems. If there are glitches with Zoom meetings, it's something that's really external to us, the other internet or Zoom itself, but we're in really good shape.
So if this continues, do you think that you have enough, or is there a way to get more bandwidth, or is that even a logical discussion topic?
With our provider, Norvado, yes, there is a way. We could put another line in to double the capacity. We're actually paying a really reasonable rate. I think it's about $400 a month for 1 gig service fiber. So yes, it is possible to increase the bandwidth.
And I assume you have a contingency plan for that kind of implementation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who or what is funding that grant that you were talking about for election security?
It's through the Wisconsin Election Commission, I believe. They're distributing the funds.
Okay.
And it's around, if we get the full amount, I believe it's around $35,000.
Not just for the county, or does it get distributed to the town? I'm sorry.
I've heard you talk about election security before, and that our machines are not connected to the internet, so they're relatively safe, even very secure. What's going to change? What are they offering, or what can we do to improve it?
To be honest, we don't do anything with the machines themselves. There's a firm that provides the programming, and then the clerk's office puts the programming into the machines, and then that does the counting. The security that we're getting the grant funding for is basically for our network. Since the clerk's department is on the internet, it needs to be, secured. So hackers can't get in, we don't accidentally go to malicious sites. It's that type of thing for our internal network.
Okay. Would that be just good for the county clerk's office, or would that be courthouse wide?
Great question. Actually, the benefits would be, the grant is specific towards clerks, but it would be applied countywide. So every department would benefit by the additional security.
I wish you luck. Don't forget it. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't Russian bank.
Anything else from Mr. Colson?
Did you have a question?
Nope. I'd just like to commend you on some camera footage we looked at, and it was exceptional. So you must be responsible for the cameras and the videos and that part too, Mike?
For the security footage here?
Yes. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, moving on then to number 8, Human Resources Report. Rose?
Hello. We have a report there. This week, our big thing we're working on is contact tracers and getting more into the public health area. So we have 2 current employees who are going to start doing 5 hours a week additional. They're 35-hour-a-week employees, and they're going to start doing 5 hours a week contact tracing. And then we're going to bring on 2 LTEs. We're also going to move, I believe her name is Dallas. She's LCO contact tracer. We're going to actually move her into an office here in the courthouse because the connectivity that she's having, like with her cell phone and stuff, it's just not working. So we're going to provide a space here. We filled the billing clerk position in Health and Human Services. And by doing that, that opened up a secretarial position. So we advertised in our billing that, and we also have an open receptionist position. So we're in the process of filling that. We have 2 full-time AEMT positions and we will have 1 full-time regular EMT position. And I'm talking to Nate. We were holding off filling these positions and filling them with part-time people just because of COVID and the revenues. So it's working for now, but we're probably going to have to advertise and fill those positions. That's about it. Yes.
On the connectivity, back to who contacted who. The other night at Health and Human Services, Julia gave us a presentation on that. And she talked about how difficult it was to get people to talk about who they had been in contact with. And that the group that is being hit the hardest now, the 20-somethings, they're already doing it on social media. Hey, I've got it. They send it out to their friends. And it also sounded like some of these connected contact chains weren't giving us a lot of valuable information. Can you enlighten me or?
Well, people don't really, they're hesitant maybe to share who they've been in contact with when they get contacted by the county. And so that's one of the things we look for with the people that we're bringing into Contact Trace is, that they have the ability to get people talking and be comfortable and bring that information forth so that they can continue and do the contact tracing. So the 2 full-time people that we have right now that are going to do it, that's their main job. They actually work in Health and Human Services, and that is their main job, is they work with the public already. So they're used to doing that.
Oh, I was gonna say, what was their job before?
Well, they're still doing it. They're in economic support, but they're 35-hour a week. So we're going to take them an additional 5 hours and help with the contact.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
I like that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is it, Tom and Rose, is this tracked in our COVID accounting system so that we get reimbursed for this stuff?
Yes, yeah.
And it's budget neutral then with that reimbursement?
Well, we're hoping so. I mean, it all depends on how long this lasts, how much we spend, is there any more money available? So right now, we do have money available for that, and we'll see where it goes, right?
Yeah, Julia's got a separate pot of money than from the COVID-19 pot. It's a separate pot specifically for contact tracing. So that's where this particular stuff would come out.
And I think Lacutere got some money for a contact tracing. Is that being utilized with that person?
That will be, yes.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for HR? Oh, the youth justice supervisor.
Yes, we've been notified the youth justice supervisor will be retiring in October. So we will work through that recruitment or
Which year?
this October.
Yeah, that was kind of a shocker. Okay. Anything else for HR? Mr. Kinsley, Mr. Slender, Ms. Dennis? Okay, appreciate it, Rose.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Hawk, County Administrator's Report.
Good morning. I have a few things I wanted to cover with you this morning. Obviously, some of it is COVID-related activity. You know, the county fair that's this weekend, right? Starting tomorrow, today, it's Thursday. And that fair is still on. The Sawyer County Fair Association obviously is a separate entity from Sawyer County. They lease the fairground lands from the county. And the Fair Association does have sole discretion on the events that they have under that lease agreement. So, you know, as a separate entity, they have met with their board all along with, you know, about the fair and how it will operate or if it should operate. And obviously the fair is still going on. They've worked very closely with our public health officer, just like we do with every other business and entity out there to recommend safe practices. And the Fair Association has really gone above and beyond to prepare as much as they can to have a safe event out there. They are requiring masks to be worn indoors in all areas, obviously in compliance with the Wisconsin masking mandate. They also have requirements in the outdoor areas too, where 6 feet of separation can be maintained. And the buildings, the flow of traffic, they've changed that this year so that there's a specific entrance and a specific exit so that the traffic all flows in one direction and can stay distanced. There's not a small animal barn this year in compliance with the CDC recommendations. The livestock auction won't be held, but individual owners can be contacted directly for animal purchases. There's no petting zoo or pony rides. Grandstand events will be available. We'll use all available space to accommodate the appropriate social distancing. The Chris Croce concert will be in the main tent to provide additional space and viewing areas for appropriate distancing. And they do have carnival rides and they will be cleaned between riders. So, you know, and the Fair Association, I think, met a couple of weeks ago. That was their drop dead date to either have the fair or cancel the fair. Obviously, we've had a significant spike in COVID-related activities since the time that they've met. You know, so there has been a lot of discussion about, you know, why is the fair still going on? Well, that's why. I mean, they've been taking as many precautions as they can. Yes, we've had a spike recently, but you know, people have the option of attending the fair or not. And if they do attend, you know, they'll be masked and social distance. So precarious times we live in, but I think they've done what they can do to make that a safe event, and it shall proceed. The public health officer is also working with other businesses to recommend safe practices, you know, signage, distancing, masking. You'll notice that there have been businesses that have been affected by COVID activity, whether it be an employee who has become positive or known cases emanating from a business. And there's been a few restaurants that have voluntarily shut down, which is nice that they are being safe in their practices. And we applaud their activities and for that. So that's kind of on the business front. As Mike Colson alluded to, we're doing some extra work on the website. We've had some complaints or comments about the website hard to navigate or not having timely information. And there are ways to improve that. Obviously, it does take resources to do, so we've allocated some IT resources and some other staff to improve the timeliness and the friendliness of the information that we're providing, specifically on the COVID side. Related to that, we've put a person in place, actually a volunteer who's got some experience with this sort of activity to help get the content out there. So, with public health personnel being inundated with activities, they don't have time to keep very current on a lot of the activity that needs to be updated. So we're working with another person. They're funneling that activity to them. We can format it, get it on the website and social media, and hopefully that'll improve our communications about activity within the county. Obviously, we're under a masking order here. We've done some and continue to make improvements to the building. You'll notice that there's been plexiglass installed, like in the zoning and land records office. We're waiting on the plexiglass for the treasurers and register of deeds yet. When those come in, we'll be able to open, the metal gates so that there can be communication without our staff going out into the hallways and communicating with people. So it'll be a little bit safer for the public and our employees once we get that in place. So we've talked with Julia. We're ready to do that in those areas that have plexiglass. We just need to coordinate that with those departments. And questions, from employees. Employees are also getting edgy, as we see the uptick on activity here. So we still have many employees working outside of the building. And those that are inside obviously are masked unless they're in an office in accordance with that guidance. Speaking of guidance, we're under the state emergency order currently for the masking guidance. We've been waiting for the WCA to produce a document that gives guidance to counties. With the Palm decision, that kind of changed the landscape on what authority looked like, or perceived authority, as far as local health officers having authority to do local orders. Right now we're under a state order, but there may be a time when a local public health officer may need to do something different. But with the Palm order, the state said, okay, we're backing off. It's the county's responsibility to do as they may. So in order to do as we may, or as we see fit in the future, there's this guidance coming out from WCA that recommends certain practices and perhaps ordinances in place that help us enforce a local ordinance or a local order if one should be deemed necessary by the local health officer. So as we get that guidance and look at it and decide, if our ordinances need to be updated in order to reflect the current state of affairs as we know it today, we'll be bringing, any ordinance changes with that, so that if a local ordinance or local order is needed, it could have some enforcement authority behind it as well.
Tom, may I interrupt you?
Yes.
So if our local public health official deems an order necessary and mandates it, is our sheriff mandated to enforce it? Or can he give an opinion like you did with the masking order from the governor?
Yeah, that's an important distinction, because the local health order would be enforced by the sheriff or by the local health officer. And that's what that ordinance update may help with, just to clarify, because, it's kind of cloudy now what happened with the last Palm decision and how that affects us. So a new ordinance may help us clarify the responsibilities of those parties and help the public understand what our authority is. Because I think Julia, the public health officer, and the sheriff have had conversations, obviously all through this. The sheriff put out a statement that I think got taken out of context in certain respects. They're clarifying that with another statement coming out probably today. So be looking for that. The sheriff is obviously supportive of public health initiatives. They've got obviously many other things to do besides enforcing whether somebody is wearing a mask or not. You know, that's what I think he was trying to get across, is that we're not going to be the masking police on an individual walking down the street. But if there are businesses that have signs in their doors saying you don't need to wear a mask here, then that's an issue that the public health officer looks at and would need the help of the sheriff potentially. So, you know, we're not going around to businesses looking to shut them down. We're looking to help them educate the public, making sure that we're having a safe environment as possible. That's kind of the COVID update. Any other questions COVID related? We talked this morning, you know, about the 2021 budget. As we've talked about with the board before, we're looking to, you know, issue debt for more capital items than we had in previous years to free up more operating levy for the operations that we need to do. We've had a good discussion this morning, I think, with a financial advisor that is helping us structure that debt, how it looks not only for 2021, but into the future. Then we'll be developing a planning tool, much like, you know, the budget is a planning tool on a year-to-year basis on the operating side. We've got the capital improvement plan that kind of lays out a 5-year capital plan. And then as we start this debt issuance kind of scenario, we'll develop also a debt planning tool that looks into the future on how debt could be structured to help us not only plan the capital items and when they occur, when they happen, but also the associated debt with that. So you'll be hearing more about that as well. We've got a CJCC.
Oh, Tom, just a second. Could you share the timeline with these folks that finance is looking at as far as passing that initial resolution?
Yeah, so we've got a couple different scenarios there. One, you know, is this new idea of issuing short-term debt for capital items that had been in the operating budget. So it could be like highway projects or squad cars or those types of things. True capital items that we could legally issue debt for. We would issue that debt and pay it off, you know, in a shorter term, whether it's 1 year or a maximum of, you know, 2 or 3 years, preferably, you know, shorter. But what you'll see in September then is a resolution authorizing the issuance of that debt. So, you know, you've previously authorized us to use debt in the planning of the budget. And so that's what we're doing. So we're kind of laying that plan out to finance. And then you, as the board, would need to pass a resolution authorizing the issuance of that debt. So if we did that in September, that allows us to plan that in the document for October, you know, public hearing and into the newspaper, and then it would be approved in November. So that's, you know, that new piece of debt that we're looking at. There's also the debt related to the second courtroom. If in fact, you know, we proceed with that second courtroom, that would require us to issue debt to pay for the construction of that. So that would be a 20-year issue type of thing. So that's a longer term debt issue that would be separate from, you know, this annual type debt issuance. We would also be bringing forward a resolution authorizing that debt. And so those authorizations to issue debt require a 3/4 vote of the elected body, not just those present, but the total elected body. So it takes 12 votes out of 15 in order to pass these resolutions to issue debt. So on the courtroom side, once you decide on a location and, you know, that you're proceeding with a courtroom, and here it is, and this is the plan estimated cost, we would also do a resolution authorizing the issuance of debt for that. And that can be kind of a general resolution and not to exceed. But we get that 3/4 assurance that you're going to proceed with that so that we can continue planning not only the construction of the building, but also the financing of it as well. So that initial resolution, once it's authorized by that 3/4 vote, and that's good for, could be a couple of years, actually, if it took that long to get things rolling. I don't anticipate that. But the point is that would be done about the same time or at the same time as you finally decide on a location and proceeding with the courtroom, if in fact that's what you're going to do. So those would be kind of tied together.
I hope everybody got that. He doesn't have to repeat all of that.
I've heard it twice now, and it's better. I've got it. So actually then, Tom, there's 2 resolutions.
There would be
Right.
two
One to
different-
balance the budget.
one for
Correct.
issuing debt for capital items related to the budget, yes,
Current
and then one related to the construction of the courtroom.
Got it.
Was I confusing?
No.
Okay.
And we want those to come to us in September.
Yep.
When we choose the option for the courthouse, do it together.
Yeah,
It's exciting though, either.
and that's dependent upon the discussions, with the city, if we can work through that, and if not, then, what's the alternative plan, and we go round and round. So it's, as Mr. Kinsley knows, we discussed this a little bit last night in closed session, but those discussions continue, so they're happening. It's just a slow, tedious process.
Thank you.
Winter Depot, I think they've officially said that September 4th is the grand opening, or whatever they're calling it, celebration of whatever. The building looks fabulous. I've seen the pictures. Ron Pettit has sent those out. I think that's going to be a great asset down there. It's
When
really
is that grand opening?
September 4th. There's a schedule of events. I'll put their schedule of events on the county board agenda as well, so it's in the packet, so you can see there's several different things happening throughout the day. That's Labor Day weekend. They've got some speakers and some raffles and some other things going on, so that'll be very nice to get that under our belts here. And we've been working with their accountants and our accountant just to work through, because the county initially worked through the grant for the initial funding on that, and so we're finalizing the numbers on that. So that's all coming together. That's good. Also on the building front, the airport, we've been talking with Hayward Aviation about improvements to the terminal building. There's also some discussions about the cleaning of the runways. There's been some comments about how often that's cleaned or how well it's cleaned. It gets sticks and rocks and whatever on the runway, which is not beneficial to landing a plane. So they're working through some issues on that. The census is in full swing. The sad part about it, Wisconsin, I think, has got a response rate on the census of about 70%. Sawyer County, the overall response rate is about 34%. So we are not getting participation in response to the census. So at this point in time, the census workers are going out and knocking door to door on people who have not responded. So if you hear of people knocking on doors asking census questions, it is legitimate and needed. Obviously, we want as high of a response rate as we can, because a lot of the aid that counties give is dependent upon population. So as you hear things in your areas or encourage people in your areas or your towns to participate in the census, that's very beneficial to the county. The city has notified us that they are planning another TIF district. There's a meeting in September about that. We'll be beginning bargaining with the sheriff's union in September as well. I think there's an initial dates after that. I don't have it written down, but Mr. Kinsley and Mr. Schleter and myself and Rose, I believe, are on that. Yep, Tweed. Yeah.
You say that, do we have a certain date for that?
We do have a date, I just don't have it.
It's the meeting following this meeting.
next month.
in September, okay, that Thursday. And that's what I have for today, unless you have questions or comments on any other topic.
Ken? What a great report. Now, you mentioned in finance that the budget deficit, you don't see it as bad as you thought.
Did I say that?
Mike did, I'm sorry. Is that true?
I'm not sure he said it either, but, the numbers we have, on the preliminary budgets from departments, middle, the number that he had out this morning was about 1.7 million shortfall, which is higher than we've seen before, but there's reasons for it, namely, the Health and Human Service, all the placement costs. The three big departments are also the three big ones that have higher budgets than the previous year. Sheriff's Department has some additional costs, as well as Highway. But we're working through with those departments, trying to, and this is the process that we do every year, is work with them to whittle that down as much as we can. And every year we do that, and that's why we're in the position of there's not too much left to whittle down, which is why we need to move some of those capital items outside just to make enough room to provide the services that we're currently providing.
Maybe it was the amount of money that we were estimating to have to borrow to
Yes.
balance the budget.
Yes, the number that we looked at in finance was from a couple of weeks ago, numbers that we gave to our financial advisor to use for developing this tool. And he used a number for capital expenditures that is higher than we'll end up with. So that's where Mike said that number will be lower, yes. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, because I hope nobody said we were not as bad as.
It's doing the amount we would need to borrow.
Might help us if we say something positive.
Exactly.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hawk? No, Ms. Dennison?
No. I said, great report.
Yes.
And then I'll
So have we set up? No, we probably haven't set up your next meeting with the city yet.
No, I got an email this morning from the representative, and we'll communicate with them again once we get out of the committee meetings today. And I was going to say too, I apologize for not having a written report. I try to do that, and then I never quite make it. But I do have a written report I will have a written report for the county board, so that it's in the packet. And so then, the important thing is to memorialize, what we've done, and that it's written somewhere, so we can look back and say, okay, what the heck did we do? What did we think? So try and memorialize that as well. So.
And did I cut you off when you started with CJCC?
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've got a meeting next Wednesday at noon, CJCC. Obviously, we've lost Diane McNeighbor as our coordinator for that. And we also lost Dick Welsh in the Sheriff's Department. And so how do we fill those gaps? And we'll be discussing how we're looking to do that through help from Justice Point, a firm that initially helped us, with some, not testing, but formulating the formation of the CJCC to begin with. And they've got a proposal that they can help us through this transition period of, are we going to use new employees or drug testing? What are we doing? What's the long range plan for this? They're going to be hopefully helpful in that endeavor. And that's what we'll be discussing with the CJCC group to enter into a contract with Justice Point to provide some of those services.
I've seen that proposal from Justice Point. How is that going to affect our budget in 2021? And is Mike aware of that? And is that in the projections, or where do you see that?
Yeah, so Justice Point is, has worked with us as far as what our existing budget is. So we've got those two positions budgeted, plus, testing supplies and electronic monitoring. So, the total budget for the activity that we're doing now is $220,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so the proposal from Justice Point kind of is within that range. It's pretty close to what we're doing.
Right.
They would be utilizing 2 of their employees. We already got testing supplies from them as a source. So, that cost is kind of built in. So, the budget or the proposal that they have worked with is kind of similar to what we're doing or had been doing. And then the question becomes, is that what we want to do in the future, or do we want to, how do we position ourselves to certainly obtain that TAD grant funding that is available next year, because that's a 5-year grant that only comes around every 5 years. So this is really important time for us to get in a position to get that funding so that we can improve upon what we're doing in providing services there. Mr. Schneider?
So they met with the tribe, didn't they?
Yeah.
So are we going to develop some kind of cooperative model then between the tribe and?
Yeah, they were very impressed with Nick and Lydia Gobber.
Because the MOU is, I think we're in the second year or the third year of the MOU, which is a $25,000 contribution from the tribe. And, but that was based on the framework that we were going to have an employee and the county, I think, was on the hook for 50. So if there's going to be a change up, could there be a discussion as to what that cooperative model could be? Because it might
Yes.
be, and then who's going to write the grant? Who's going to write the TAD grant?
Justice Point would be helping us with that. They've done that before, and that's another great advantage of getting them on board, is that they would be actually writing that for us.
Do you think the tribe could help with the planning department and either assisting with either really collecting some of that information?
Yes.
Because here's the issue that it's going to be is that you got 2 jurisdictions that you're dealing with, and I don't know if you need a release, but a model of cooperation might be helpful in terms of trying to implement it, because one of the goals of the CJCC, which is, it mirrors the goal of the tribe, is to try to reduce the amount of incarcerations, and developing a plan for services usually at the time of charging instead of waiting for a conviction. And I think we kind of drifted off of that. COVID clearly had an impact on that, but I think that the sheer numbers overwhelmed the infrastructure that we had that we contemplated. So it doesn't matter how many people we would have, we would still have that many more people waiting to go into the system. And so I guess that could be a point of discussion for next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Jim, when you said reduce the number of incarcerations, I've always felt maybe it's a small point, but it's not just reducing the number of incarcerations, but reducing the number of incarceration days.
Right. Yeah, well, it's the same thing. So, I mean.
Well, it's really not. It's a small difference.
Well, here's the plan was, instead of having them sitting in jail waiting for the court system to get caught up because of the backlog with the DA, the second courtroom and all of that, if we could get services in place from the time that they're first arrested, get them out on that bond testing, because we say we don't have a drug court, but we have a nucleus of a more modern drug court, because it deals with it instead of waiting after conviction, it does it at the time of charging, where they can be released from jail and to start getting services sooner, before waiting for the conviction component. So I think that
incarceration days.
yeah, and that's why I said that it's kind of the same thing, because what we want to do is, instead of having them sitting in jail waiting for whatever it is, which is then predominantly Native American, and it's usually because they either don't have the resources or we don't have the resources on the county side to facilitate those cases, then we're addressing both of those at the same time. So they get charged out, they go do their bond hearing, and then from the bond hearing, Justice Point or whoever then starts becoming kind of like a quasi case manager to get those set up. And this is where we have CCS on both the county and on the tribal side. And then we have other services that gives them an option of doing that sooner. And then the carrot then is, well, you can sit in jail and wait for your preliminary hearing, wait for your adjudication, or you can start getting services now. And then if they reoffend, well, then that changes the dynamic. But that was the plan from the beginning. But we had so many people and so little resources that it locked it all up. Would and it looked like we weren't even making progress. But now we're slowly sorting through this. Anyway,
Great
but
question.
but then if we can get assistance on the tribal side, because they have their CCS is up and running. They also have other services that are available for tribal members, and there's a different funding source. There is access to facilities, because one of the actual charging that people are getting is failure to appear, and that's actually probably about 30 or 40% of the charging documents that they're facing, or failure to reappear once they've been bonded out, and then they get a bail jumping charge. So by having that closer, then we can start integrating different services, especially with Nemacolin Transit and different things, which we were in discussion with prior to this whole COVID thing. So there's a plan in place. We just, COVID is taking and shaking the whole thing up.
So we're doing a expansion at our tribal government office, and it's gonna be enlarging the courtroom. And it's also gonna be providing a Zoom meeting room for tribal members to go and meet with the judge via Zoom from our office. We're gonna propose this when we meet, so that they can be in front of the judge at those times of appearance and not have to get a ride to county, be able to do it right there in our court system. That's in motion, and that's in the plans built, and I want to show you those plans. And our judge will be at the CJCC.
Next Wednesday?
Yep.
I was just thinking, it seems to me like most of the energy is on reducing the number of incarceration days, which is, I applaud, highly laudable goal. But we also need to push harder on fighting recidivism. And some of what you said does that by encourage them to get to their court dates on time and so forth, which prevents reoffending. But it goes beyond that. The situation that caused the person to do an offense in the first place, unless that changes. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, and I mean, that goes to the core issue is, I mean, we have a meth problem. And COVID, that's the one thing that COVID hasn't been able to disrupt, has been the use of illegal drugs. And, you know, in fact, it's probably gone in the other direction, you know, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hoff? Excellent report. Thank you. All right, then moving on to number 10. Board policy regarding public comment, discussion and possible action. We've discussed this, Tom and I, and I've heard from new supervisors that would like this addressed. So I handed out the current board rules as far as rule number 8, public participation in board meetings. Several supervisors have come to me, and we've actually included our legal Rebecca in this. And we can address the language of this. And it would be a recommendation from this committee and send it on to county board that we can allow public comment to only pertain to items on the agenda. We always want to give the public time to speak, and we can change this language, as I said, to address items on the agenda. Now, Tom and I had come up with some different language, but it's not on here, but I want to hear from this committee about your thoughts and what we'd like to bring to the full county board, Mr. Flynn.
So I have a couple of things that I wanted to raise. One is I would be highly skeptical of any kind of substantive change to public comments, because I think that we're messing with something that really doesn't. I think it can be misconstrued. Well, it will be misconstrued.
Yeah, I was concerned about that.
And you and I both have been kind of maligned with our procedures in terms of how we've been doing things, but you know, we follow these policies as best as we can. And not only are we only human, but we're dealing with humans that are free to think and say whatever they want to say. And so the things that I would want to have considered, and this is in light of some of the scrutiny and some of the public communication that's been happening this last couple of months is when we have public comment, I think that our minutes should reflect the people who are present. They already show who's there. But if they address the committee, their name should be stated for whatever reason. Just have the names out there. We make them say their name and where they're from. That should be reflected in the minutes. And I say that because in our current meeting structure, it doesn't say that. And so my notes had information regarding people coming forward, and that's just what I do as a board chair because I need to kind of track what that is. And thankfully, Zufall, of all people, was able to substantiate that there was some, communication that was coming through public comments, but there's nothing that shows in the record. And it's been my understanding, as I served on this committee, that we don't want to, we don't engage the public when they do public comments because we don't want it to be a deterrent for people to participate. Because you have, at any given time, you'll have lawyers that serve on there. You've got, business owners. You've got people who are veteran county board members, and they speak quicker to the issue than the person who's coming up. And so if they're coming up and we engage in that commentary, they may not be ready for 15 people in terms of an interrogatory kind of setting, especially if there's lawyers. We have a different matter of engaging with people, and that will be a deterrent. The other thing is, we should never restrict what a citizen wants to say to this committee. And I think that if we cap their ability to address it to issues that are on the agenda, I think that we're doing them a disservice in terms of limiting. It's like what we call prior restraint in the law, and that I understand that there's frustration with some of the people who come in front of us, and they have these, trying to think of a polite word, these very well thought out conspiracies, or they're very well out thoughts of why they think that they're justified. And it's a subjective presentation, but they have that right to that. They have that ability to come in front of an elected body and present those views. We may not have to support it. We may not have to act on it, but we should encourage them to have that opportunity. And so that's what I would say. I'd say we need to do something to document when someone addresses the committee, and then I would be against any kind of restriction as to what topic they can address.
HR is my list, number 8.
Any other comments? Mr. Sweeter?
I disagree with certain part of the statement of Mr. Schwender. We already place limits, no personal attacks on individuals, 3 minutes per person. So restrictions aren't always viewed as denying free speech. And if we look at changing possibly to only items that are on the agenda, that may take some education, but I think it's a restriction that we could handle. And maybe part of that education that we need is letting the general public know that we have 15 districts and 15 members in the county board. If you have a concern about county government, call your county supervisor. That's the easiest, quickest, most personal way to get your thoughts, concerns in front of the county board and into the system, and then ultimately to the county board. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Dale. Ms. Dennis?
I agree with what Dale said, but also I was one of those who pushed that this be changed. I'll own it. And I've seen it changed in other governments, and it works very well. if they have a concern that is not on the agenda, they also have the option of sending out an email to the whole county board, not only their representative. We don't participate anyway. I mean, we don't interact with them on public comment. But I think, you know, it seems like every meeting, and I think it's gonna be more and more so, we could have 20 people come to a meeting for public comment and all say the same thing, which takes up time. And that's what I think. I think we need to change it to agenda items only, and if they have other concerns, they can send an email, or like Dale said, contact their district or any county board member, actually. In fact, I'm dealing with one of those right now.
Okay, and there were other supervisors. But thank you for warning that.
Well,
So currently, you know, it reads, members of the public will be given the opportunity to address the board during public comment. And it says for items not on the agenda or at the time of consideration for items on the agenda. Now, you guys know how I've addressed that before. I reserve public comment for the time they can speak, public is to speak. But when we get on that agenda, I like just the board to discuss it. There are certain times, and it does say where the board chair has the authority to ask for a comment. Like I tell Tom and other people, like when we're talking about Berkey issues, and if Ben Pop is sitting out there and has something to say, of course I'm going to know it. Or during a zoning issue, if the participant is actually named in the zoning, or it's their zoning property that's being discussed, I'd like to give them a comment. Mr. Schwann.
So my question would be, is this a board thing, or is this gonna be something that's gonna be also assigned to committees?
Good question, Tom.
I think the second page, I found the other section in the committees, at number 18, addresses how committees, public comment and committees are handled. So between those two sections, you know, that's the only things I could find in the board rules that address how you handle public comment. So I think the first page was the board public participation, and then the number 18 and 19 is
committees.
Pardon me?
18 and 19 is committees.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's out of the committee section. So those were the ones that you have in your board rules now.
Mr. Kinsley, then you can stress.
Well, I'm gonna give a shorter version, Mr. Thunders.
I think anybody could.
But
not an
at the
account.
same time, I always respect and like to listen to how he views things, and I always like to listen to that. We meet once a month. I respect what Ms. Dennis and Mr. Spear said. If someone wants to address the board, how much time is it actually taking? In a general meeting, we might be waiting 5, 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes they get into a half an hour. If we have a hot topic where there's going to be 20 people come in, we've addressed that before lots of times by reviewing what they want to talk about, and we ask them to pick one person to speak in that topic. And that has eliminated a lot of the problems. I guess when we're meeting once a month, if someone has something to say, you know, they pay taxes here, most of them do anyway. Let them speak for that 3 minutes. My thoughts.
So that is lead the rule as it is.
can we get a comment from Rebecca? Is she on?
Is she on?
I am.
Okay, Rebecca, we'd like your thoughts, please.
Sure. And what I'll do is just kind of walk you through what the legal requirements are for public comment, with the premise that this is ultimately a policy decision for all of you. Under the statutes, it is very clear in Chapter 19 that the public is entitled to full and complete participation, or full and complete receiving of information regarding any government activities. However, that does not extend to a right to make public comment. And that is both a statutory section and has been reaffirmed in by the Attorney General. And specifically, it has been concluded that public comment, any public comment, is not necessary at a public meeting. That does not apply if you have a statutorily required public hearing. That's a different animal. So what we're talking about is public comment on any given agenda. So again, to recap, the law does not require the county to have any public comment on an agenda. If you want to limit public comment to just agenda items, that is permissible under the statutes as well. If there's also been opinions issued by the Attorney General regarding additional limitations on public comments. One specifically, a citizen said, my rights to under the First Amendment are being curtailed by these limitations on public comment. And both under the statutes and the Attorney General said, no, you don't have a right to make public comment in meetings, again, unless there is a public hearing statute requirement. And certainly you can submit those public comments through other means, whether it be in writing or talking offline to your representative, things of that nature. So obviously, from the government standpoint, the statutes require full and open government. But that does not translate into you have to have public comment. Or if you want to place restrictions on that public comment, such as limiting to agenda items, you can do that. And again, that's a policy decision from you. What I will say too is from the WCA's perspective, this is a hot topic in many counties, and there are counties that do have limitations on public comments being only limited to agenda items. The concern that Andy and I had with this, or with such a rule, or let me rephrase that, not having such a rule, goes back to what Mr. Schlender commented on, that you can have things brought up in public comments if they're not agenda items, that now you are having this information shared and it hasn't been published on the agenda. Now, obviously there's not supposed to be discussion on those items and there isn't supposed to be engagement with the public during public comments, but it does create open meetings concerns and also potentially open records concerns. So if there is commentary on non-agenda items, how then is that? We have to make sure that that's properly memorialized in the record. And again, that goes back to what Mr. Schlender commented on, that if there are non-agenda items discussed in public comment, those should be reflected in your minutes. So you do have some record that you would be able to look to in order to properly respond to an open records request. So that's the outline of what the law requires, or again, doesn't require in terms of public comments. But again, ultimately, whether you want to limit public comments to only agenda items is a policy decision for you. If you have questions about how you would structure that, or structure other amendments to any board rules, please, feel free to ask. Any other questions?
Yeah, Rebecca. So if in public comment, someone brings up something not on the agenda, and of course the board does not engage in discussion or certainly not action, as long as it's noted in the minutes, then that would be open meetings law. That would be good for open meetings law, right? Not an infraction or limitation.
That would be one way to remedy the open records concerns, yes, to note it in the minutes that this, that these comments were raised, the subject matter of the comments, and a summary of the comments. That is one way, again, to remedy some of the concerns that, that we have from a legal perspective about talking about non-agenda items during public comment.
So that's what we do now, except that they're not noted in minutes, correct, Jim?
So here's what, so if someone comes in and says something that's not on the agenda, that's not a county board person making representation. It's a public comment that's, said for whatever reason. We don't memorialize any public comments now, so nothing is in there that's a discoverable thing. But if it's a policy decision, how does open records or open meetings law attach to a meeting that doesn't have any statutory requirements? So, I mean, it's kind of like, it either is it or it isn't. So, I mean, I'm just confused about that, and I'm less worried about that. I think that my question would be is, so if we change this rule and that public comments are open to the public, so if we're letting people from don't even live in the county come in and address the county board meeting, that's another issue. That's why you have to say where you're from in order to, I guess, another limitation, right? Is so if I'm chairing economic development, someone comes in and says, my name is Bob Smith and I'm from Manitowoc, and I think that your board is doing, this kind of job or whatever, and I let him speak off the agenda, am I going to be sanctioned, or what's the enforceability of that?
Why? Because it was Manitowoc.
Want me to I can answer that. The enforceability would come by the chair, because the chair is essentially carries the obligation to enforce the board rules. So it would be, that's the structure you'd be looking at in terms of enforceability. So you'd look to a decision of the chair, whether to let that person speak. The chair could then make an exception. And then that decision would be obviously based on the board rules.
Inslee, do you have more to add?
Just because he's not from the area doesn't mean he can't speak.
That's my concern too, because I don't read anything in these. Rebecca, did you read anything in our rules that says you have to be a citizen or landowner in Sawyer County?
No, not that I'm aware of. Let me just do another quick check.
So that's not a limitation.
And I think what we do is ask their name. I don't think we state where they're from. At least.
Well, some provide that they have property. Right.
Some do, but that's voluntary on their part.
I remember we put these rules together. We worked very hard on them, and at this point, I don't see any reason to.
Either. So.
Okay. Discussion. Do you want it? Would you like it on a county board agenda for further discussion for the whole board, or what does this committee think?
I spoke my piece.
Yeah.
You just
There's other supervisors besides Ms. Dennis that brought this up that are not here.
Oh, that's fine.
It's your
I guess
discretion as
the
chair.
chair, he wants to go to county board.
I'm not just asking you guys. This is a great discussion, and I'm glad we hashed it out. Some good points brought up here.
And that's why I did bring it up and
Yep.
request it, so.
Oh, yes, yeah.
As you say, these rules have been enforced since before my time. And I'm reluctant to fix what really isn't broke. But if I was going to change one thing, it would be keep your comments related to agenda items. Because there are, I believe, better methods of getting your concerns about non-agenda items into the process of having them recognized for the board. But that's, again, I'm reluctant to fix what ain't broke.
Mr. Flander.
I would. So a lot of the work that we do as committees comes up from someone who comes in at public comment, and the issue of why we even have this is because there was a gentleman that came in October who wanted to talk about the second amendment, and I told them then that we couldn't really respond to it because it wasn't on the agenda. So from there, it became an agenda item. And then there's, the subjective history of whoever wants to read whatever they want to read about what that is. And so that's what started this process. So sometimes public comment invites an agenda item. And I think that if we put that, if we kept that, I don't see where the harm is in allowing for that to be, I've sided with Mr. Kinsey. They got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
If they want to talk about the weather, if they want to talk about their appreciation for, something that the county has done, then you're capping that because that item wouldn't be on the agenda. And conversely, we had some people go completely off the rails, completely disrespectful in their comments. But the thing about having free speech is they have a right to say what they're going to say, as well. And so you can't have one without the other. You can't just let everyone say nice things. You got to let people say crazy, unsubstantiated things as well.
Ms. Dennis.
Can we get this on for the full county board
Okay,
and let them decide? As you said, there's,
discussion.
Your motion.
would you give me a minute? I make a motion that we put this on for the full county board for discussion and possible action.
Yes, ma'am. Looking for a second.
We're just gonna let it go. Okay, forget it. I rescind my motion.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Is there any other further discussion? If not, then we'll move on to future agenda items. Any other matters for discussion? Oh, Mr. Kirkley, would you like to say anything regarding the fair?
Fair starts today, and make sure you go support your fair.
Where are we at with the discussions with the city of Hayward?
Well, Tom mentioned that a little bit in his report. Why don't you?
Yeah, the city met on Monday in closed session. We had a closed session in Public Works Wednesday, so those negotiations continue. And we'll also update the county board on Thursday in a closed session as to the progress.
Thank you all. We are adjourned.
The